And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start tonight's program by introducing Chad Price, Head of Product Planning, Hyundai America Technical Center, Incorporated.
Good evening, fellow engineers, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests. On behalf of the entire Hyundai Motor Group, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. We're very excited to speak to you tonight about one of our favorite products right now, the all-new Hyundai Genesis. It's an amazing vehicle that we want to speak to you about and hopefully expand your horizons on some of the things that we've done with this vehicle in terms of engineering. But before we get to those, I'd like to take a couple seconds for some housekeeping. One, is everybody enjoying the evening so far? I definitely want to thank all those that have organized this event, put it together, the suppliers, even the wait staff and the cooks. I think they've done an amazing job so far. So please give them a round of applause. And secondly, I want to quickly go through the agenda for tonight so that you don't have to see my face too often. I'm going to introduce some of the folks right now to you so that we can quickly move along through the entire process here. Again, my name is Chad Price. I'm the head of product planning at the Hyundai America Technical Center, and I'll be going through some customer needs. I'll give you a baseline, some of the foundation, if you will, of how this product came to being. And then after my remarks, John Robb, who is the head of our electronic systems group, we'll talk about infotainment. From there, John Doriga, who's the head of our product powertrain group, is going to talk about everything propulsion related, especially the all-wheel drive system that we're very proud of. And then finally, Scott Margison, who's also the head of product planning, but for the Hyundai America group out in California, will take us finally to the design and the chassis of this vehicle. Now, anytime I do one of these presentations, I always like to have kind of a common thread or a theme to bring the presentation together. And ever since a child, one of my fantasies and things that I've loved to look at is the stars and the cosmos and how things were created, the world around us. And so I wanted to use that as a theme to kind of tie this presentation together. And one of my favorite authors is a guy by the name of Stephen Hawking. Does anybody know Stephen Hawking? It's a few hands out there. But at the same time, one of my favorite TV shows right now is The Big Bang Theory. Are there any Big Bang Theory fans out there? All right, so it looks like there's a lot more Big Bang Theory fans than there are maybe Stephen Hawking. And I really tried, quite honestly, to take that, the Big Bang Theory and incorporate it into my presentation, but I honestly found it was very difficult when I was doing this presentation to slide the word bazinga in on every slide. So I went away from that, and I'm going towards the Stephen Hawking. So I'm titling this presentation based on a book that Stephen Hawking wrote, A Brief History in Time, if you're familiar with that book. And this book talked about the beginning of the universe. And I think it's fitting for the Hyundai Genesis that we talk about this brief history in time because, quite honestly, this is only the second generation Hyundai Genesis. So it has been here in the U.S. only a slight period of time, very short in terms of all the other luxury vehicles that you may well know. And because of that, we think that for future generations, this Hyundai Genesis is going to be the catalyst for future luxury vehicles for Hyundai in the future. And from there, I took the Stephen Hawking, if you will, idea, and each one of these slides will have a quote, some of my favorite quotes from Stephen Hawking. And the first one I'm just going to read to you. I may not read them all, but each one of the slides has a different quote that kind of ties it all together. And this quote is, "Today we still yearn to know why we are here and where we came from." And the why we are here part is very simple and easy. Of course, it's right here in front of you. That's the all-new Genesis. Now the why, or where we came from, that's a little bit more difficult. And this slide here kind of shows you the evolution, if you will, of the Hyundai brand. And originally, as many of you may know, when we came to the US, we focused on being the low-cost producer. We had vehicles that were very cheap, and you can see our sales spiked. But the brand image became cheap transportation. That was not the brand image we were looking for. And quickly, some of the quality issues that we had with our products resulted in a poor quality brand image on the lower there. And you can see that our sales actually dropped off significantly. So what did we do? We reacted quickly. We looked at quality. We focused mainly on quality. And we actually built a very good quality vehicle from there, and it produced an excellent value proposition, we felt. We had low cost and relatively good quality. We moved into our next phase, which we were calling the fast follower phase, where we looked at a lot of the competition, what they were doing with their vehicles, and decided we need to do that or we need to do this. And while that allowed us to become a true competitor, it didn't get us to the next stage, and that's the next stage I want to talk about, which we call the future of Hyundai. And that future is modern premium, if you've heard that tagline before. Modern premium is what we feel is the next stage of our brand. In order to get there, one of the things that we really need to do, we think, is to be an innovator. And this Hyundai Genesis, this new Hyundai Genesis, is really one of the first vehicles that we're bringing out that takes this modern premium and embraces it and uses this innovator mindset to go forward with. Now, some of you may remember that we had the original Genesis, and as this quote from Stephen Hawking reminds us, we definitely didn't look down at our feet. We were looking at the stars, and we produced a great product, quite honestly. That product was so good that we won lots and lots of awards. J.D. Power, a 10 Best Engine. We were recommended by Consumer Reports. We were even the North American International Car of the Year when it came out. Very spectacular vehicle, right? But, as Stephen Hawking always tells us, is that the universe does not allow perfection. And we heard a lot of the negativity, or as we like to call in the industry, the opportunities, if you will, of this vehicle. You know, we had some opportunities for all-wheel drive. We had some opportunities to take our styling, and instead of being maybe a mishmash of multiple different luxury vehicles, we could have our own unique and distinctive styling. We saw a couple other things that we wanted to work on. So from there, we decided, as I showed you, we wanted to be, instead of a fast follower, where we focus in on some of the luxury brands out there, the Acuras, the Lexus, the Mercedes, the BMWs, we decided that we had to take a new direction. And that new direction really was to focus on one thing and focus on one thing solely, and that's on the customer. The best thing that we could do was really focus on the customer. And so what we did as an engineering community is we did immense amount of research, just tons of different research on the customer. We did ethnographic research where we actually went in the homes of customers and talked to them about their luxury vehicles and what they want in their next luxury vehicle. We did ride and drives with these customers and took them out on with our vehicles and other competitors and allowed them to tell us what they liked and disliked. We did a ton of data mining, just all sorts of data mining on what were the needs and the wants of these customers. And what I'm going to go through the next few slides is a very high level, very simplistic view. We did a lot of detailed views. Some of that's proprietary, and I won't share that with you tonight. But we looked at a very high level view of these customers. And what you'll see here, if you can kind of follow the Pluto, if you will, the Genesis, is what these customers think about their vehicles. We ask them questions about how do you perceive the vehicle that you just bought. So these are all owners. And the size of these planets, if you will, are the size of the volume and the share of sales for these vehicles. So you can see the Genesis, of course, is very small when you compare it to the Mercedes and the Audis and the BMWs and the Lexus. And what we did was we asked them, how do you view your vehicle? And one of the things we found here, when we charted it against how powerful and sleek the vehicle was, what we found was we were plenty powerful, quite honestly. We had the TAL V8, which came out at that time, which is a very impressive engine, but we were definitely not very sleek. And this is what our customers were telling us. And then we looked at sporty versus luxury, and you can see we were luxurious, but maybe not sporty. In fact, we were one of the least sporty vehicles that was out there. Now, I want you to know that we understand on the inside that no, I'm not telling you that the Genesis was as good as the Lexus or the Mercedes in terms of luxuriousness. We knew on the inside that wasn't the case. But the buyers that were buying this vehicle were often move-ups from a Sonata or from a Zera or for a non-luxury vehicle. And so for them, this vehicle was a step up, and it actually was additionally luxurious for them, and it raised the bar from what their expectations were. So I want to make sure that that's very clear, that we don't consider ourselves necessarily on the first generation as luxurious as some of our competitors. Then we looked at fun to drive and distinctive. And as you can see, way off on the other side, we were neither distinctive nor fun to drive. Not a very good brand value proposition, if you will. And then we looked at one more thing, is we wanted to look at what the difference was from a buyer who was a non-luxury buyer to a luxury buyer. And there was a lot of key differences. And these charts here kind of show the general trend. If you look at a Toyota buyer versus a Lexus buyer, or a Honda buyer to an Acura buyer, where that flow goes, and you can see those arrows up in here, is generally from a non-luxury to a luxury, it's more sporty and luxurious. That's the general trend. But if you see the Genesis, right? Genesis was completely 90 degrees off of the general trend in the industry. We were more luxurious, but we definitely weren't more sporty. Then if we looked at fun to drive and distinctive, same general trend. The luxury vehicle is generally more fun to drive, generally more distinctive. Same sort of thing, right? The Genesis was 90 degrees off of where we think it should be. It was more distinctive, but not necessarily more fun to drive. When we looked at innovative and youthful, an interesting trend for this was going from non-luxury to luxury was from left to right, so more innovative, but not necessarily more or less youthful, which is very interesting because these buyers, of course, are typically an older buyer. And what we found when we're talking to these buyers was from a youthful standpoint, they really found that their vehicle made them feel more youthful anyway. But the Genesis was not the case. The Genesis was definitely not a very youthful vehicle. So we were, again, off track. And then finally, from a powerful and sleek standpoint, we were actually somewhat generally in the right direction. But what was off here was if you look at the sleekness of the Hyundai non-luxury, this was actually when the Sonata had just come out with a fluidic sculpture design. And quite honestly, these buyers loved their vehicle. It was very sleek. If you look at this data, and this is data all in the past when our Genesis originally came out, if you look at this data now, I think the gap would probably be much more closed with some of the other OEMs coming into more stylistic and more sleek vehicles. One other thing we wanted to do when we looked at our customers was to look at who influenced them. Where were they getting their information from? And we looked at luxury versus non-luxury. And you can see on this chart, the highlighted region shows there's one key difference between a luxury buyer and a non-luxury buyer, and that is that the luxury buyers really look for the automotive magazines in terms of their information on how they decide which vehicle to buy. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. These luxury buyers, time is money. They don't have enough time to go out and drive 4 or 5 different vehicles. They don't have enough time to research everything. So what do? They depend on the specialists, the people in that area that know the most about this vehicle. And this is a very key thing for us. So what did we decide to do from this? Was we actually went in and canvassed multiple experts in the industry, people that are in automotive magazines, people that have been in other companies, to people that have been in all sorts of different walks of life that are considered the experts in the industry. And we found out from them what we should do as well, because they're the ones that are actually telling these customers, what do you think you should go after? And there's 5 things that we looked at in terms of what we wanted to do for this vehicle. And the engineering groups after me will tell you a little bit more in detail about these, but those 5 things are: 1, first and foremost, we had to get an all-wheel drive in this vehicle. That was very apparent. Second, our driving dynamics were not nearly what they needed to be when you looked at us compared to the competition. Third, distinctiveness and luxuriousness we saw from those charts. We didn't hit the mark necessarily on that. And then innovation. We definitely wanted to go after increased innovation. And then finally, NVH. So those are the kind of the 5 key areas, if you will, that we wanted to look at. So what do we do? This quote from Stephen Hawking is very interesting. It talks about, you need to prove it. And I think this room full of engineers, you don't want a product planner like me telling you that you need to be more luxurious or telling you how to do it. You want us to prove to you what we have, right? So what do? We actually flew dozens and dozens, almost 100 engineers from Korea and the US over to the center of the universe, if you will, of luxury. And that center of the universe was Germany, and is Germany at the time. And what we did was we took these customers, or these engineers, and took them through several different things. The first one was we took our vehicle, our current Genesis, and matched it up with the main competitors. So you can see a 5 Series and you can see an Audi. And we hired some professional drivers and took these professional drivers with these engineers onto the Nürburgring, which is one of the most famous tracks, of course, in the world, and showed them exactly what we're talking about in terms of the dynamics and the handling, the responsiveness of this vehicle that we might be lacking. Now, one of these vehicles came in first and one of these came in third. I'm not going to tell you which ones did, but I can tell you that our vehicle was at least one of those. And you might be able to guess which one. I'm not sure if you got that. But we also took our engineers and took them out to the safety track in the Nürburgring, because we also found out that luxury buyers really care about safety. And we actually took them through a safety course where they learned how to drive safely with their vehicles and compared our vehicles to the competition. And then finally, as part of this week-long event for these engineers, we immersed them in luxury. And some might call this a boondoggle, but what we actually did was we took these engineers and we put them up in the finest hotels. We had them eat at the finest restaurants. We took them on the Autobahn with some of the nicest vehicles that you could have out there. And yes, we're accepting applications for engineers. Anybody who wants to apply to Hyundai, this is the kind of things that we do in Hyundai. But the point of it was we also showed them non-luxury hotels, and we showed them non-luxury eating establishments, and we wanted them to compare what really was the difference. You can see the difference in the quality sometimes. You can see the difference in the service. You can see the difference in the materials. You can see the difference in how your soap dish is in your hotel. These are the kind of things that we looked for our engineers to determine. And we also benchmarked non-luxury, non-automotive luxury. And if anybody's familiar with Mont Blanc, it's an interesting story. We did a tour of the Mont Blanc facility, and they showed us their manufacturing process and the way they buy off on pens. And one thing that's very interesting is they actually take each and every single pen, and one person goes into a soundproof booth and has a special specification paper and draws specifically designed curves on a piece of paper and listens to the sound of that pen on that paper. And if that sound does not meet exact specifications, they actually reject that pen and throw it away, and they start again. And those are the kind of things we wanted to instill in our engineers. How did we actually determine what truly is luxury? So after we took them on this boondoggle, if you will, the final thing and the final quote that Stephen Hawking, I think, sums it all up very well for us in terms of where we want to go was, work gives you meaning and purpose, and life is empty without it. So the next thing we did was we told our engineers, get back to work, right? We know as engineers that's what we're constantly told. We have to get back to work, time to go to work, and that's exactly what our engineers did. And our engineers worked long hours, they worked overtime, and this right here, the all-new Genesis, is the results of that. And now that you've heard a little bit about the customer, I want to introduce my next speaker to tell you a little bit more about the actual detail engineering.